Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Stan Lee, Marvel, and Rolling Stone 1971, a 50th anniversary look back panel. I'm Danny Fingeroth. I was a writer and editor at Marvel for many years from the 70s to the 90s. And I've written a biography of Stan Lee called A Marvelous Life that, as you probably can guess, I'll be plugging later on. But I'm not why we're here, since I was still in school when a lot of this stuff was happening. Robin Green, who's center square on my Hollywood Squares screen, is an award-winning TV writer, producer, known for her work as an executive producer and writer for The Sopranos on HBO, and as the creator with her husband, Mitchell Burgess, of the CBS drama Blue Bloods, now in its 9th season. She's an alumna of Brown University and holds an MFA from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. Green lives in New York City with Mitch and their little dog, Silenzio. In 1968, Robin worked for several months as Stan Lee's secretary at Marvel. On assignment from Rolling Stone founder Jan Wenner, Robin returned to Marvel in 1970 to interview people, including some of these people, for an article about the company and its people. The article was published in September 71. The 50th anniversary of her article's publication is the reason we're doing this panel today. Roy Thomas has been a writer and editor primarily for Marvel or DC Comics since being hired by Stan Lee in 1965. Among the many comic series he has written are The Avengers, The X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Conan the Barbarian, Star Wars, et al. He worked exclusively for Marvel from 65 to 80, and served as editor-in-chief from 72 to 74. At Marvel, he co-created, get ready, Wolverine, Carol Danvers, Vision, Ultron, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, Havoc, Valkyrie, Red Guardian, Adam Warlock, Morbius, the What If series, Werewolf by Night, the later with then-wife Jean Thomas, who's also here today, and numerous other characters. In the 80s, he co-wrote screenplays for the films Fire and Ice and Conan the Destroyer, and a bit of live and animated TV. He currently edits the award-winning comics history magazine Alter Ego, published by Tomorrow's, writes online adventure comic strips for Edgar Rice Burroughs, Inc., and from 2009 to 2019, ghost wrote the Spider-Man newspaper comic strip for Stan Lee. For the German publisher Taschen, he authored the humongous books, 75 Years of Marvel, From the Golden Age to the Silver Screen, and The Stan Lee Story, and has written and/or selected material for numerous other comics-related volumes for many companies. In 2011, Roy was elected to the Will Eisner Hall of Fame. He can be followed on the Roy Thomas Appreciation Board on Facebook, managed by John Cimino. He is married to Dan Thomas, with whom he has collaborated on comics. They live in rural South Carolina amid a menagerie of boisterous beasts. Jean Thomas. Here's Jean. In an origin story familiar to fanzine readers, Jean Thomas came to New York from St. Louis and went to work at Marvel at age 20 as editorial and office assistant at the behest of then-husband Roy Thomas. After graduating summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa from Hunter College with a double major in psychology and education, she returned to Marvel to write romance stories, Night Nurse, and Spidey Super Stories, which taught teaching to read comics in conjunction with the Electric Company. / Children's Television Workshop. Taking a dramatically different path in life and career, she proceeded to edit for the American Journal of Nursing Company, irony is not lost, then do public affairs, fundraising, and marketing for social service agencies and historic New York City teaching hospitals. Jean has hidden in plain sight, sometimes living mere blocks from Marvel's offices with this secret identity for decades. Hi, Jean. Linda Fite. Linda Fite's first job after college was with Marvel Comics in New York. Her duties entailed helping Flo Steinberg, who was then Stan's secretary, with the fan mail and doing general editorial production assistant tasks. She worked in the bullpen for about 18 months. She then became, for a time, the art director of a trade magazine with offices on Park Avenue South. Having married Marvel artist Herb Trimpe, who I think we'll hear more about from several people later, earlier that year, and finding herself pregnant, Linda began a long stint of working freelance, not only writing comic books, most notably Beware the Claws of the Cat, but also doing layouts and mechanicals for a scientific and scholarly publisher on Lower Fifth Avenue. Herb and Linda and the baby lived in Cornwall, England for a year, then moved back to the States, settling in the mid-Hudson Valley. Herb drew comics and Linda went to New York once a week to drop off and pick up mechanicals. Her next gig was as a church secretary, but finally she got a job with a daily newspaper, first as a columnist, then a features writer, reporter, and finally as a copy editor. After 20 years in the paper, Linda retired. Today she's a copy editor for a twice-monthly local newspaper in Ulster County and a grandmother and the owner of Too Many Roosters. And last, but certainly not least, as the saying goes, Mimi Gold. Mimi studied filmmaking at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, guided over her 4 years by then unknown grad assistant Martin Scorsese. She set her sights on becoming a film editor, but on graduation, friend Jim Steranko took her to her first New York Comic-Con and introduced her to Stan Lee, who was once again in need of a Gal Friday. She joined the Marvel bullpen immediately and was dubbed Mischievous Mimi by the man. For someone who stepped into the Silver Age by accident, she evolved as a Marvel and DC editor and colorist. Mimi is recognized as one of the industry's first female superhero writers. During her editorial and writing career, she earned a degree in hotel and restaurant management, ultimately traveling the globe for 3 decades as a marketing exec for Hilton Hotels, numerous travel destinations, and culinary celebrities. Wow, I want to be a culinary celebrity. She has most recently built a real estate business in South Florida, but continues as a storyteller through her writing, painting, photography, and digital presence. Thank you, everyone. So welcome. So the scene is 1968, a tumultuous year in history. Libraries of books have been written about that earth-shaking year and era. We could do a whole panel about 1968. Some of you may see my convention panels about 1968, but I'm not doing it today. Vietnam, assassinations of Kennedy and King, riots at the Chicago Convention, as reenacted this past year in the trial of Chicago 7. The era had its musical soundtrack too, of course, which coincided with the founding of music magazine Rolling Stone, though the magazine wasn't solely about music. As Bob Dylan said to Jan Wenner from the stage of the Beacon Theater in November 2019, and yes, I'm doing this just so I can do my Dylan imitation, Rolling Stone is the magazine of sex, drugs, and politics. 1968 was when Robin Green came to work at Marvel as Stan Lee's secretary. 1970 is when she came to research the article on the company for Rolling Stone, an article which would see print in September 1971, 50 years ago from the present day. The period of late 60s, early 70s is what most people mean when they refer to the 60s. Marvel was part of what defined the era, and so was Rolling Stone. Everyone on this panel was in or around Marvel during this period, and Robin, of course, is the one who immortalized it all for Rolling Stone. So then, what was it about Marvel that led Robin to pitch a feature about it, and about Stan Lee to Jan Wenner? What made Wenner immediately accept her pitch? And what led the rest of the panelists to work at Marvel and do what they did there? How did they think about it then? What do they think about it now? How did it inform what they did in later life? And most importantly, any good gossip or funny stories the panelists can recall about each other or anyone else at the company is encouraged and welcomed. Thank you for putting up with that. Welcome, everybody. So that was the cover by Herb.
I wonder where that art is. We never got that art back, so I wonder where it is.
But Herb Trimpe drew that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got his signature.
And he did the center spread too.
Right, I have that also.
Yeah, that's there somewhere. I saw it earlier.
I guess Jan kept it. I mean, someone took it at the office, but we never.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess
very
right,
possible.
There's no
Cover theft is normal.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's a great cover. Robin, do you remember if it sold a lot of issues, that cover?
No, I don't. I remember that they held it. It was the first thing I wrote for them, but they held it until the summer when they burned off the weaker inventory, meaning that this really wasn't their audience.
Right.
So they, but it had an audience, obviously. Today it eats the world, but they held it for a good long time, and I don't know if it sold or not. You know, the biggest selling issue was the David Cassidy cover, which sold in gay bookstores like hugely. You know.
Wow, isn't that great?
Sort of a niche audience, but yeah, there it is. But I don't know what this sold actually.
Right.
Is the significance of this the fact that it was perhaps almost the first sort of I don't know, one of the first national articles about Marvel. I mean, I know they'd been in the New York
Was it?
papers, but was it, in a sense, one of the first really national, a big major coverage of Marvel in a national audience? There wasn't that much before
I
that.
mean, is this the point at which I should address something that Dan said about how the article originated, or will you question me about it later?
We can get, for those of us under, if there's anybody by any miracle under 40 watching this, that's someone that wanted to show I'm not going to talk, 1968, there's too much to talk about. This movie came out, it's on Netflix, some of it's actually true, but it gives you a sense of the times a bit if you want to do this.
I liked the movie. I thought it was good.
Me too. Me too.
I thought that Sacha Baron Cohen or whatever his name is.
Oh, he was great.
Great.
He was great. I had some issues with the portrayal of other things, but overall, and he was the best thing in it. This is the music that would have been popular around the time Robin was working at Marvel. That Rolling Stones cover from Beggar's Banquet, that was the one that was censored, and they put out that cream-colored one just with the script, but that was the original cover they wanted to...
the one with the baby heads, right?
the one with the toilet.
No,
there's one with the baby heads too, but this is just the one with
Beatles.
the toilet. Yeah.
Right.
That's the band. That's Dylan. That had come out in the previous December, John Wesley Harding. But this was Rolling Stone. Other issues, Dylan I put, because I'm a Dylan nut and his 80th birthday coming up, although it'll pass by the time this airs, John and Yoko. And then Country Joe McDonald, who was not as big a star as the others, but was one of the few rock stars. Well, Roy is right. Now, the Fish regularly visited the Marvel bullpen, and Stan loved to brag about it, but I don't think Country Joe himself, based on a conversation I had with him, I don't think he was actually there, or maybe he was for one, but not two or the three times they went there. But
I only remember anybody being there once, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have come another time.
Yeah, I think they were there at least twice. I can't figure out three.
Yeah.
Joe can't remember, and you could attribute that to the 60s, but if you read his blog, Joe remembers a lot of stuff really accurately. So I'd say if he doesn't think he was there, he wasn't there. Outside the realm of Marvel, and it sort of ties in this Zap Comics, Robert Crumb's, the underground was starting to come into their own. So people who wanted to read comics in an altered state didn't have to read Marvel comics exclusively. They now had their own. And this is Flo. So tell us about Flo.
There she is.
How did you meet Flo?
Well, she interviewed me. I had gone to New York, and I had just gotten out of college a year before, 6 months before. Oh, there I am as a young girl. That's why they called me Legs. Stuart called me Legs. He made me a drawing of myself. But I went to an employment agency, and they sent me on 3 interviews, 2 advertising and 1 Marvel Comics, because I was like a literature major, so I wanted a job that had something to do with literature. So it was just advertising and comics. But thinking about it now, I just realized that when I was also an artist, so when I saw just the atmosphere of Marvel Comics, I didn't feel at home in the advertising world at all. Marvel Comics really made me comfortable, as comfortable as I got in those days. And Flo interviewed me. So I sat down, at her desk, and she interviewed me a little bit and liked me enough, I guess, personally, to introduce me to Stan across the hall. I mean, he was like 5 feet away, Stan,
Yeah.
Small
offices.
Yeah, I mean, I could, see him doing his antics in there with the writers. But look at Flo. I mean, look at the way she smiles. Look at her eyes and her cheeks. She was such a sweet presence and had a wicked sense of humor away from her desk. Let's say that.
Thanks, Roy. Anybody else have any memories of Flo or?
Well, Roy would. He was in the room with us.
Yeah, she and I and Saul Brodsky shared the office. Saul was the production manager for up to about 1970, and so yeah, Flo was the first person I met the day I came up there in '65. She's the one who came out to give me the writer's test, which Stan had invited me to take and so forth, and then the second time I was in touch with her was she called me a couple of days later after I turned it back in at the DC offices while I was editing a Supergirl story or something, and you know, I'd only met her once before, but the conversation basically went, "Hello, Roy," and I said, "Oh, hi, Flo." You know, I knew her voice right away because it was this high pitched, shattering glass kind of voice and so forth. But she was, such a nice person. She says, "I'm being a spy today. Can you come over and see Stan, dude?" But we were, we were good friends. We went to see Bob Dylan together. Danny, you'd appreciate knowing that.
I know. I'm jealous.
I didn't sing a single song I recognized.
Yeah, well, that became true.
Yes.
Where did you see him? Where'd you go?
Up in White Plains, which up there, and I actually, though, the funny thing is, I looked at the program later. Someone sent me. It turned out he sang "Visions of Johanna," which hadn't been released at that time, and which is actually my favorite Dylan song. So I should be happy about that.
There's probably a bootleg tape of it somewhere.
Yeah, it probably is.
So there's you. There's Jan Wenner.
Oh, there's Jan.
So how did how did you end up in San Francisco and pitching him the idea of talking about these strange people at Marvel?
Well, here's what happened. I went to Rolling Stone to see if a friend gave me the name of someone to have an interview with, and I went there to be a secretary again, because that's all I thought a girl could do, even though I had been a writer in college and studied fiction and all that. So the guy that interviewed me had heard I was a good writer in college, and said, "Why don't you go to see Jan, and maybe you can write for us?" And that had never occurred to me, that people actually did this. I mean, I sort of knew it happened in New York, that women could write for magazines, but I sent a box to Jan Wenner with all my stuff in it, and among I was the editor of the Brown Literary Magazine at college, and just all the stuff that I had done, and some cookies to eat. And one of the things that I put in there were Marvel comic books, because I had worked there, and it was just, that's how I did my curriculum vitae. It was just this gift box, like a sweater box or something. And I didn't pitch the Marvel story to him at all.
Really?
It was Jan who said to me, and that's what he looked like then, except I don't remember that desk. He said, "Marvel Comics, what was that like?" And I just said a bunch of sarcastic things, That's in my art. Is that in the article? No, maybe not. That's in a book. I wrote a book about all of this. And, I just said, I don't know. It was just, kind of nerdy, I said Stan wore a wig. His wife was sort of obnoxious, and the daughter, they would swan. And, I just said a bunch of edgy, nasty things that. And he's the one who said, "Why don't you write about it?" And I was like, I didn't say it, but I was like, well, why would anyone want to read that? But it really speaks to, no, that's the truth. And so when you said, my pitching it, that's not what happened at all. But it speaks to Jan's ability as an editor.
Yeah.
That he knew how big this thing was going to get. He knew, he came right in the ground floor with it, and he just knew there was an audience. He knew it was, he could sense heat before heat even happened. You know what I mean? Because now Marvel is so huge, and when I hear of all that Roy has done and all of that you all have done, I really credit him with understanding that there would be an audience for this thing at some point, that it was popular culture. And so that's what the magazine was. It was popular culture. And so he asked me if I was going to New York anytime soon, which meant he wasn't going to pay my expenses. I was going to a friend to be in her wedding in Long Island. And so I was going back, and my boyfriend, David, who was a photographer, was coming with me. And so David took the pictures for the article. He was who I went to Berkeley at the time with, just, on a whim to live. And so that's how it happened. And also, and I'll end. And when I ended the interview with Jan with my assignment, which was kind of a surreal experience, I hadn't expected that at all. He told me that they paid 5 cents a word, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like very much. And he said, well, that's if we use the article. If not, you get a kill fee. So that's like half the money. But so that's why I wrote 10,000 words. I was so determined.
That's why you quoted the entire Mary Marvel marching song, all the lyrics.
That was a long article. People in those days had, the patience to sit and read a 10,000 word article. They did. They read it. They read the damn thing. And then, because the article was good and they printed every single word, which I counted, I got other assignments, and that was really the beginning. But Marvel, for me, it was Jan's instinct as an editor to assign Marvel comics. He knew how interesting it was and how interesting the atmosphere would be to people, what a special place it was. And I think that's part of what I responded to when I went in there. It was chaotic, but sweet. I don't know if Roy would agree with me, and I don't remember Roy talking much, to me anyway.
Had a job. we all had jobs.
I didn't do much, it's true.
Dan didn't pay me to talk. He paid me to read and write.
And then this is a issue of Daredevil 100 written by Steve Gerber that has Jan Wenner. For some reason he's blonde in it. It's from 1973. An issue 100 even then was sort of a big deal for a comic. And Jan is in like 5 pages of this story. I mean, it just goes. I don't know if Gerber had a relationship with Wenner or what, but it's a big. Roy, do you have any memories of how this story?
Oh, he probably had a permission or something vaguely, like I did when I put Tom Wolfe into a story or something. But other than that, they just, as long as they didn't think they'd get sued, they'd let you do about anything. That they thought, and Stan would have thought that was hit with Stan, if Steve had mentioned it, he said, "Hey, that's great, Rolling Stone, go for it." Was
Jan ever actually blonde?
Was Jan what?
Was he ever actually blonde, like he is in this?
No, that's not Jan at all. Oh, is that Jan?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That's
no.
Daredevil being interviewed by Jan for Rolling Stone. Anyway, that was a.
Which is weird because Cohen worked so much from photographs that he must have had a photograph, but it doesn't come out looking like it maybe as much as Gene's usual work.
I don't know, because they name him by name, so I don't think they're worried about being
I think he would really like that picture.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like he's in 5 pages of this issue.
That's really good.
A lot about him. So, Robin, what tell us the story of this?
Well, that's what I was talking about. Actually, that was my birthday, 7/31. But he just called. My nickname was Legs because I wore these ridiculously short mini skirts that were popular then. Not in New York so much, but when I got to California, I really fit in. But so he did that picture of me. I guess that's what I looked like, and I kept it all those years.
Stu Schwartzberg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he was in our room though, Roy. Was he?
No. He had. I think when Herb got started drawing, comics, Stu became the keeper and worker of the photostat machine, which had its own room.
Yeah. Stat
and he
man.
very rarely came out of that room. He actually was a very talented artist and writer in the kind of Kurtzman school. And when we had that spoof magazine briefly, he just, and then later for Crazy, he did some wonderfully funny Kurtzman-esque stories. But he was a very quiet kind of guy. I don't know, did you pose that picture? He looks like he got it from a weird angle there.
I guess that's how he saw me.
I guess Stu just died recently.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
really?
Yeah.
There is everybody in this picture, though. There is the gang.
This movie, Miss Firecracker, this picture reminds me of that scene in the movie where Holly Hunter goes, "Dad, Dad, Dad, Dad." It's really depressing,
Well, about half those people everybody has been identified in that picture very easily, except for the one guy who in the back has his head turned toward our left and is looking at the very tall John Verporton there. Nobody seems to be quite sure who that is. Everybody else they know.
You still haven't ID'd him, huh?
Not for sure. Not for
Never
sure.
heard.
Well, yeah, Stewie's on the left with the mustache.
Yep.
Um,
That's Al Kurzrock next to him. They were both in art school together with John and Herb and several
He
others.
became a psychologist, right? Died.
That's right. First he went to Haiti to paint. He was painting oil paints in Haiti, but then he ended up settling in Florida as a psychologist.
He was as funny a guy as I ever knew.
Oh, he was so smart. He was so smart. And his dad was a Park Avenue doctor, and the kid was so...
Wait, Stu or Kurzrock?
Kurzrock. I don't know Stu's parents, but...
No, I don't either.
Who is sitting at the desk? Is that Steranko?
No, it's
No.
Tony
That's
Mortellaro.
Tony
Gordy
Mortellaro.
Mortellaro, who was an old artist in the more in the 50s. They used to, by that point, he was doing production and he did backgrounds for Romita. He's famous because one of his hidden porn images is in Dr. Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent.
Oh, cool.
The one where there's a drawing of a man's shoulder and the muscles and lines of the man's shoulder form the lower regions of a woman, you know, and so forth. And so that's his claim to fame.
Look at the picture. You know, there's one woman, Marie Severin, and that probably, what was the readership of comics in those days? Was it mostly men?
That's about the ratio.
Yeah, I mean, it was that way. No, but it was that way at Rolling Stone too. It was, I think, an 80 or 90% male readership, and that was reflected on the masthead. I was the only woman on the masthead as a writer, so you know, all
the only girl, right? Wow.
is your proof here, but
book there, yeah.
That's the way it was then.
And who's the guy, Roy? Who's the one next to you?
What's that?
Roy, who's between you and Marie?
Oh, that's
Alan Brodsky.
That's Alan Brodsky.
Yeah, I was supposed to be in this picture, and I don't know why I'm not. I might have been away, but Al Hewitt had left, and I was promoted from Gal Friday to assistant editor.
Are you talking to Al Hewitson?
Al Hewitson had left, so I took his spot, and I worked with Alan Brodsky in the next room. So I knew I wasn't in this picture, so I was obviously not there that day. But this is that period of time when the two of us were up front, and I don't know. It's really weird. I hired Holly Resnikoff to follow me, and I was working up front, and Holly was in the back with, at that point, John Verporton was the production editor. Saul had just left, and Holly's not in the picture either. So there really were at least one, if not two more women that aren't in the photo.
Yeah.
So it's not everybody.
Maybe Danny, do you want to identify or identify everybody else in the picture?
Oh, well, look, Gil Kane is in the upper left. Gil's the oldest one in this photo, so he must be like 50.
These weren't office people. Some of these were like he and Jerry Conway. They were freelancers who just happened to wander in and got dragged in.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's Bill Everett. Well, Bill must have died shortly after this, Roy, right?
No, this is taken in 70. He didn't die till February of 73, I think it was.
There's Herb. Now, Linda, who's the kid was Herb's child?
Yeah, Missy, she's 50 something now. Yeah.
That would make sense. John Verporton in the background became the production manager, died in 77, really at age 36, I think, or some horribly young.
He died at the turn of very end of 77.
77. There's you. There's that guy we don't know. There's you. There's John Romita.
Yeah.
Who must be 40 in this picture? 45.
More than that.
Not much older though.
No, I don't think
not
so.
Really.
I think he was around 40. He
Yeah,
still had little kids.
That's about right. He was about 10 years older than me, and I was 30 at this time.
Right.
Yeah.
So Roy, this picture is from 70, right? Okay, and then there's Mori Kuramoto,
and then Tony.
Who worked at Marvel. He was a production and paste-up guy, but it turns out in his secret identity, he was one of the world's top watercolor painters. And then
Stan didn't deign to be in this picture with us. He didn't come down with the please. He needed his own picture.
That's weird. Does anybody know what that? You know, Stan would rarely miss an opportunity to photograph.
He must have been out. That's all I can figure.
There were other photographs. There are photographs of Stan in the article.
Oh yeah,
lots. Yeah.
And that's Tony at the desk. Was this at 575 Madison or one of the earlier ones? probably about
Beats hell out
6:35.
of me.
5:35.
Oh, look at it.
There's Roy.
Oh, great. That. Somebody got me one of my favorite photographs. You know, I don't know what I'm doing there.
Look at that shirt.
It's a great
Yeah.
shirt.
I don't know.
It's
Maybe Jeannie
it's
picked it out for me. I don't know.
Better than a Nehru jacket.
Better than the Nehru jacket. That's true. That's true.
Anything would be better than the Nehru jackets.
One time
Yeah.
Roy took us all to lunch at the Playboy Club. It was such a treat. But all I could think of was Gloria Steinem. Oh,
Well, I have no idea what I was doing there. Is that money? Somebody said in the picture. Somebody.
It looks like money, yeah.
I must have been robbing some late MMS payments or something.
Yeah, weren't kids spending in just cash for their clubs and stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
there
So
he is.
This is Stan at that period.
Ah,
This is Stan in his real first early flush of being famous, where he had the toupee, which Roy, when did he get the toupee? Around.
Well, he had it. He was starting to wear it really around the time I came there, because very soon after that was the time when he would go back and forth. One day he would come in wearing a toupee, and the next day not. And finally, Flo, I could hear it in the other room saying, "Well, Stan, you know, we love you whether you have hair or whether you don't have hair, but could you make up your mind, because you're making me very nervous." But I think he started wearing the toupee more after that.
So 68. I just want just sort of to
Yeah, this is
maybe jogging people's memories. Who unlike you and me, Roy, don't spend half our days researching this stuff. This is Stan.
Hey, I wrote half the books on that behind Stan.
I'm not saying you didn't have a good reason to research it. I'm just saying that, you and I are a little unusual in that way. This was Stan's first flush of fame when he started making some political statements, both in private life, nothing radical, and in the comics. And this was a pilot. If anybody remembered the circumstances around this, I'd love to hear it. In Stan's archive, there's a video of Stan kind of as a David Susskind kind of talk show host, interviewing a bunch of local New York student radicals. One was the editor of Rat magazine,
Wow.
which out radicalized The Voice and The Other even. One was the editor of the Columbia Spectator, and one was the editor of the fancy schmancy Dalton School magazine. And Stan was doing a show on what today's youth want, and they were, and I don't think it got picked up. I assume it was done as some kind of a demo. Does anybody remember anything about this or know anything about it?
I don't remember him ever mentioning it to me, but
It's on YouTube.
I may have been aware of it vaguely at the time, but that's about it. I know he was supposed to be on a new show sometime around there, a guest shot on Al Cap's show that he had briefly, but then, Cap got framed or whatever, chasing that, which wasn't hard to get him to do, evidently, chasing a girl around his apartment, and so forth. And that show was canceled, so Stan's show never aired. But I don't remember hearing about this. He had that cable show a few years later, but I don't remember this.
And this, of course, was when Stan also did a lot of campus speaking. If anybody remembers any backstory on any of Stan's campus speaking, Mimi, you're shaking your head.
He used to talk about being at colleges on a regular basis or being interviewed by college newspapers on a regular basis, because his mission at the time was to bring the acceptance of comic books as a form of literacy teaching. And every time he got interviewed or asked to speak on that subject, he got very, very excited, and he used to rush in all the time and tell us in the front office about the newest things that were going on. And he was always, preparing us to usher in an interviewer when that was happening. But for him, being recognized on college campuses was probably more important than just about anything, because he felt that from colleges and universities came the future writers and teachers who would accept comic books on a much larger scale.
People in comics in those days were much more impressed than they should have been by college degrees. I think it didn't help me or other people hurt us getting a job and so forth. Because, people who grew up like Stan in the Depression, they never had a chance to go to college. So when somebody came in looking for a job, me, Denny O'Neil, other people, had a college degree or whatever, Flo, most of you. So I think it was more impressive impressive, not just to him, but to the people at DC and so forth, Julie Schwartz and the others, Mort Weisinger, than it would be, you know, today, where it'd be just, you know, so-so. But at that time, a college degree kind of meant something, you know, because it was just that first generation where a lot of people had been to college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is something else Stan did that year that you know, and that Roy and I reprinted a transcript of in a book called The Stanley Universe. This is Hilda Mossey. She was research partners with Frederick Wortham, the anti-comics psychiatrist. And there's a tape that of her debating Stan on the Barry Farber show in 1968.
Wow.
Anybody doesn't ring it? It was like an all-night New York show. It was really, it was, you know, so Stan was out in the world proselytizing Marvel himself.
Not necessarily in that order.
Well, yeah, you know, it did take him a while. It did take him a while to figure out. I think he, as you said, Roy, I think he was impressed enough with college degrees. There's a panel that you can find it online that we did for the WonderCon, where the twin brothers, the Tulenko brothers, who invited him to Princeton, I found them and interviewed them, and I think Stan was so impressed and thrilled to be invited to talk at Princeton, he forgot to ask for a fee, but I think he figured out shortly after that a nice dinner at like the student cafeteria wasn't enough, that maybe he should get more. This is Martin Goodman. This is a picture from the 40s. Goodman was Stan's distant cousin who started and founded the company. And in 68, again, when Robin and others of you were there, he had just sold the company to a company that would come to be called Cadence. So again, I love if any of that was in the air. Creative wise, this is Stan, of course. That's Jack Kirby, and you know, together they, you know, created everything in the Marvel universe except for Spider-Man and I guess Captain and Doctor Strange. So this is what would have been out for fans watching this, which I imagine at a Comic-Con panel there would be. This is what the Surfer, I know, was a character that you talked about, Robin, the Silver Surfer. The Marvel line expanded. They had been forced for various reasons to only limited to like 8 or 10 titles a month. They changed that, and so this, including Jim Steranko's Shield, started coming out. This is from earlier. This is Doctor Strange, who also got his own book that year. But I think this was a lot of the appeal to college and so-called hippie audiences, was this trippy feeling to Doctor Strange, which was hilarious because the last guy in the world to take acid would have been Steve Ditko.
Yeah, I was at the office one day late in 65, right a few months after I went to work there, and I got a call at 5:30 or so in the afternoon from somebody who wanted to know what. Said, I got to know what Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were high on when they did these Doctor Strange stories. I said, well, I don't think they were high on these. He says, well, I know they did. They had to be, because I had a fight just like Doctor Strange had with Dormammu. I had a fight, an energy fight just like that in Mexico City a couple of years ago. So I got to know what they were on so I can get back there or something, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't convince him, you know.
And this was Stan and Romita. I guess this is more in the 70s. This is Stan with a different hair and toupee configuration. You know, Stan had 4 different toupees, I'm told. One, you know, so it would look like his hair was naturally growing, and one every week, a different. And Jim Salicrup at least once went to pick up Stan's toupees. They did this. They did Spider-Man. Mimi, this.
Yeah.
When I asked you for a picture of yourself, this is what you sent me.
It just seems so appropriate. I was very surprised by this. I had no idea John was doing it. And unfortunately, I wore this really ugly green jumpsuit that day that now is memorialized this way. But I thought, I mean, I was relatively conservative. And when John presented me with this, I wasn't embarrassed, but I was a little taken with the fact that he posed me like that. But the thing that bothers me most is that I never would have worn red shoes with a green jumpsuit. And now there's nothing I can do about it. It's there forever. Yeah, but I love this. I have it framed up here in my office. It's a great reminder of that period of time at Marvel. And being with the bullpen, I mean, nobody's really talked about that, but it was in a time when people sat in closed little offices as Stan did, the rest of us were all spread out all over the place, and there weren't really any walls or doors, and everybody heard everything that everyone said, and it made for a challenging working environment because you had to concentrate and yet you were hearing all the stuff that was going on, and there was always craziness going on. And you know, in the main part of the bullpen where Herb and John and Tony were, it was never quiet.
Yeah, the nice thing about being an artist is, unlike Roy, who's writing and editing, where you have, at least for me, if I'm doing word stuff, I have to focus. But if you're drawing, yeah, you talk, you play music. It was just nonstop jibber jabber, joking, talking smack, and people coming in and then going out, and Marie drawing cartoons, and just, it was.
Yeah, I was hired at 65 to be a staff writer, not as an editorial job at all. But
Right.
you know, after a couple of weeks, it was I couldn't work without, because you know there was noise around. Stan or Saul would ask you to do something. Stan would come in and say, "When did Dr. Doom last appear?" or something, and I was having to stay till 6, 7 o'clock at night at the offices working there, or you know, at home, in order to get anything done. And I said, you know, I can't write in the office here. I can't do it. So he said, well, okay, you can write at home now and just do the editor stuff here at the office. But yeah, it was crazy. Nobody could write. I know that in all the years I was there in and around the office, I never wrote one word of, even on a lunch hour, one word of freelance, you know, type writing ever on staff. I could never have done that. Some people could, not me.
So this is
Well, the phones were always ringing. The phones were ringing. There was an endless stream of messengers coming in, papers flowing in, statted, flowing out. I mean, it was just nonstop. You had to be an air traffic controller.
Mhm.
anybody remember Alain Renee going there? Robin, you mentioned him in the article. Anybody remember him being around?
Who?
I remember.
Alain Renee, the French film director.
Yes, I was there when he came up once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
I
was-
went to
Stan
lunch
would
with him
talk
once or
about it.
twice. Yeah.
Was it?
What-
Stan was really
I think
tight,
Philippe?
right?
What, Robin?
Alain Renee.
Yeah.
I think that was a high point of Stan's.
Julie, I
really
think
was.
you and I had
He
had
was
dinner with
accepted
him,
by
didn't
the avant-garde.
we? Yeah.
Yeah, dinner with Alain Renee.
And his
At-
first wife
at-
at his apartment.
But the apartment was borrowed from one of the Nabokovs.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It wasn't
And that's where you had to ring the bell, Nabokov. I
Wow.
always remember that.
Robin, do you remember Renee at all?
No, this
Okay.
doesn't ring a bell, but you know,
Well, we rang the bell, and
the
a little girl came up and led us up to Nabokov's apartment.
and I don't remember writing it either or reading it. So
Oh, it's yeah, and it's funny. Of all the celebrity Hollywood kind of things, Stan and Renee were actual friends. And
Well, Renee was one of the, as Stan said, saw him a few times in Paris. The last time being, I don't know, sometime in the early '90s, actually, and everything. And he was just one of the sweetest guys. And I was thinking, this is such a sweet guy, and I haven't any idea what the hell any of his movies are about. You know?
he was a comics fan. So this, the Black Widow. This was Mimi. Was this you?
Yeah, I'm amazed because I have the proofs, but I don't have the cover. I don't have an actual original book, and I couldn't remember what the cover looked like. But yeah,
Marvel made a point of having female writers and editors in the early '70s, right? And that was
it was just the beginning. I mean, I asked for the opportunity to do some mysteries, and after that, I had enough nerve to say, well, how about superhero? And this was the very first one.
wow.
So
cool.
Now, wasn't Linda? Didn't you write sort of the first in a way? Didn't you write dialogue for that Marvel Girl backup story in X-Men? Wasn't that was pretty early? That would have been 67, 68.
Well, I didn't start working there till the summer of '67, so maybe it was '68.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, somebody, Annie Nocenti told me, she said, you know, Linda, my friends tell me you are the first credited woman to write a superhero. I mean, there were others who did it, you know, with under the table, but yeah. So I said, yeah, I'm a first. Yay!
But you
Well,
also,
that was pure exploitation on my part. I had been doing all these backup features about the individual X-Men, and when I got to that one, which I think Werner Roth basically just drew a bunch of pictures. I don't
It was
think I had
pretty. It was very pretty.
and I thought, I shouldn't write this. I should, it'd be nice if a woman wrote this, give it
Thank
another
you,
touch. And you
Wilma.
did a great job because you did all kinds. You gave it a woman's touch, and at the same time you could write.
Yeah.
I think that nobody, if you hadn't been for the name, nobody would have known the difference. And I think that's good. Except that so often we have to take initials like M Gold, right? Did you?
Yes,
have
exactly.
Were you
That was
L5?
hurtful. It was hurtful, but
Yeah,
I
it was not a
accepted
good
it.
thing.
so, but Linda, you wanted me, you had sent
Oh,
these
look at
photos
those
of you.
pictures. Look.
Wow.
That's when I was an art director. I was also the art department. So
And then there's you.
What's this picture?
Oh,
that's
look
her.
at
When
that.
Herb and I were getting married, we had a friend named John Riley who also made Herb Trimpe
Yes.
Love You, the short movie. The little, he did it for.
John went to school with me.
What year
Yeah.
was that picture?
Well, he took that picture for a wedding present.
And what year was that?
72, 71, 72, maybe 72. We got married in 72, so it must have been in there.
Yeah.
When you wrote a lot about her, what was memorable about her?
I wanted to marry Herb.
He was so handsome, right?
He was so handsome. Look at his chin. Look at those eyes.
I'm telling you, he's a movie star. I married him for the genetics of it. I said, he's tall, he's thin, he's cute. I'm short and pudgy. Yeah, I'm getting that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job, Linda.
Yes, and I have beautiful children.
No, we were friends. I went once to an apartment that he had.
Oh, you described it so well, where he was up on, he was,
toy planes around or something.
yeah, and he had he'd painted the most awful colors. It was on the East 80s, like East 87th Street or something.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
very small apartment that he kept in the city. I think he lived
Yeah, well, that was after the divorce. He got
Yeah.
his own little place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I might have a chance, but not.
You were a better match tall wise, but he liked me. What can I tell you?
Yeah, he liked me. We were friends.
Yes.
I don't think that Linda, you and me and Herb, I felt that we were friends, but I don't remember a lot of extracurricular activity. In other words, I don't know if we went out or I just remember.
I know we did because I went to you lived on East 10th Street or something,
Yeah,
didn't you?
well, Bleecker and 10th, yeah.
Yeah, I know you were down because
Oh,
I
no.
went.
Yeah, I lived on Bleecker Street then, yeah.
Okay, because I went to your flat at least once, so we must have had lunch because I wasn't at Marvel anymore, so we must have met somehow.
And we
Right?
must have. Well, I know that you and I were friends, but I don't remember going out with Herb and that sort of thing. I just remember everyone was very serious to me in that office, that they were there to work. Like Herb said, he was working.
Jean, you're about 11 in this picture.
Probably 20 or 21.
Uh-huh. But this is from a Marvel annual where they had the.
Yes, yes, yes.
Jenny, do you remember who took these? Was it Vinny or who took those pictures? Do you remember?
Probably Vinnie Coletta, but yes, there was a whole almost like yearbook, and we each had a caption. And I know that I was called the quote adorable assistant.
I think I wrote that.
And then you ended up writing the hard-hitting night nurse.
Night nurse, of whom there has subsequently been several generations of characters known as the night nurse. But
Yeah.
I guess this was the first. And ultimate irony is just a few years later, after I graduated from college and made a transition into editing publications, I was an editor at American Journal of Nursing, where I never mentioned this, believe me. So our lips are sealed after this.
And the top hitmen will announce that there's a contract on a guy when they show up to kill them. That's just to keep it fair, I suppose. Was that fun to do though? Was Night Nurse fun or strange or both?
Yes, a little bit. Trying to do two different audiences, trying to obviously appeal to young women, but then had to add in action. So maybe this line of women's comics was maybe neither fish nor fowl. It didn't fit into the superhero mold, but yet they were not in the traditional mold of romance comics. But they were fun.
Cool.
Right.
The more fun was Children's Television Workshop and the Electric Company with Spidey Super Stories. That was a lot of fun, and evidently no one else at Marvel wanted to deal with the strictures.
I gave it to
children's
her
television.
because I met those people once or twice. I wanted nothing ever to do with them again. And I knew Jeannie would do a great job with them, and she did. She wrote the stories well, and she dealt with them. And I never had to deal with them because every time they start talking about balloon placement, I'd want to go for their damn throats.
And we had vocabulary lists too, because I mean, they were done on specific reading levels, which was right up my alley, having a second major in education and having taught.
That I could see. It was the other stuff, you know. Thank God. You did a great job. Thank God you were there to do that.
So, Robin, you came back in 70 then to write that article. What was that like, coming back and sort of being there?
Well, considering how I left, Stan in the lurch, I called him. I had gone to Montreal with my boyfriend for the weekend, and I called him from the airport, or I called him from Chicago, I think. We drove to Chicago, and I said, I'm not coming into work tomorrow. I got hung up. And Stan said, hung up? What are you? And I heard a tone in his voice that I never heard before. He was not pleased. And so when I called him that I wanted to do the article about him, he was just as sweet and friendly and enthusiastic, and the exclamation points were back. That's how he talked, and with all the exclamation points. That's what I remember. I don't know.
You were no longer Robin Green, the departing secretary. You were Robin Green, who'd get him into the Rolling Stone.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
I'd have been nice to you too.
But I also feel that he was pleased for me. That he was generous.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I didn't know him as well as you all did. That my experience with him was limited, but he was just lovely to me. He's really sweet. And yes, he probably did enjoy all the attention, but Rolling Stone wasn't that big a deal then, was it? Was it a big?
Well,
bigger than
Yeah, anybody into rock and roll and music was way into Rolling Stone.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, but was Stan that person?
Well, he understood.
he was
he understood. Yeah,
he was savvy, very savvy.
This picture must have been taken then, but it was wonderful to go back there. It was wonderful to write about everything.
Did you say that was a Christmas party that you went to that we were having when you were there or something?
Possibly.
Because you mentioned drinking champagne and things, and unless you brought it, we wouldn't have had any there.
Yeah, I did this kind of thing, but I think I did have a drink of scotch. I remember sitting at my old desk, and all the covers were in front of me, and reminiscing a little bit. It was great to go back. And it was the first article I ever wrote. I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I just...
You did a great job, Robin.
Good article. It was.
I read it again, and it's really good. And you were and I think you were fair and balanced in the truest sense of those words. And you got Stan really well, I think. I think you really got him well.
I do want to say, as a kid, as someone, as someone a little bit younger, as a kid, having grown up reading the Marvels, when that Rolling Stone came out, and I was now, in college, it was a big thing. Yes, it was a really huge thing that there was an article about Marvel in Rolling Stone. Robin, you had one quote that I particularly, it's completely unfair for me to throw back at you 50 years later, but what the hell? You said about Stan, he was my boss, and sometimes I liked him, and sometimes I hated him, but I always did what he told me to because he worked so hard, tried so hard, was so enthusiastic, you'd want to make it easier for him. That's sort of an interesting...
Well, I don't remember hating him, I don't. Maybe when his wife had me pick up dry cleaning. Maybe that, I didn't like that very much, but I don't remember hating him any more than I hate just bosses in general. It's just my personality. I don't like it.
But that sense of him trying hard, is that... What does that bring up? It doesn't have to bring up anything. But.
Well, I just remember how he, I would see him act out the stories with the writers. I remember him being on a chair and jumping
Yeah,
off.
Yeah, very physical about everything.
Yeah,
Over
an illustration of that. Has this been written about broadly? Does everyone know this? For me, I never saw it before or since.
Roy, did you ever witness it?
He was.
Oh, yeah, sure. And of course, at this stage, somewhere or other around this time, or it was around this time that he and his wife and somebody were out in the evening. He came in the next morning on a crutch because he had decided he was going to. He decided to see if he could still click his heels at the age of 40 something. It turned out he could not do that and land safely at the same time. But he was always jumping around on stuff and everything. And that must have been out there before, because I did a cartoon in 1964 for the first version of Alter Ego that has him standing on a chair up on a sofa holding a hammer to show artists how to draw Thor. And I had met Stan or talked to him or anything at that time. This is a year before I went to work for him, so I could only imagine that that must have been out there. Somebody must have seen it, heard it, or I probably wouldn't have drawn that.
That's interesting.
So people were happy to see you when you came back. By the way, this is what would have been on the stand. This was just as the big brouhaha with Jack Kirby leaving. So again, if any, that was a big deal in comic fandom.
The John Romita cover to the last Jack Kirby issue.
Yeah. So
sold better than Jack's last 10 or 20.
So Robin, you just
I just remember with John Romita a certain sweetness.
Yeah.
Very sweet guy.
Sweet.
Totally. Never grouchy, ever.
No.
John was
Warm and sweet. Warm and sweet. And this is a Herb too, that he drew this.
Really?
Yeah. Didn't he, Linda?
I don't know, but it's got an airplane. There's a clue.
It looks like half a dozen different artists. It's a montage.
Can you imagine having, this is my first article that I ever wrote, and it's a cover of Rolling Stone, and this is the, what do they call this thing in the middle?
Spread.
Center spread.
The center spread. It's awesome. Look at how yellowed it is.
That's his character's plane, Phantom Eagle. He and Gary Friedrich did that one story about the World War I costumed aviator, Phantom Eagle, and that's the Eagle's plane there. Yeah.
Hey, Roy, that was a nice issue on Gary, by the way. Very nice.
It was great. That's great.
Alter Ego, right?
Oh,
some of it was even about comic books.
Yeah.
So that was.
He was such a, well, Linda could speak to this better than I.
You know what his nickname was in high school, which he hated, was Spook, because of those black eyes, his little raccoon eyes.
He was upset because he had gotten a Good Citizen medal.
Oh, the Good Guy Award. Yeah, you wrote about that, and he never forgot
about himself. He wanted to be
he said, I'm going to be bad.
He must have resembled Alan Alda to some extent, because I remember hearing somebody say that people would yell, "Hey, Hawkeye," when he was like running in Central Park.
That happened.
He did resemble Alda
somebody
somewhat,
for his. We went to the theater and we were standing outside at half intermission, and someone came up for his autograph. Mr. Alda, may I? Oh no!
See that? Look at the caption. It says Herb Trimpe, artist. Herb Trimpe, they say, that's one guy you don't have to worry about. It was just
he hated that. But he was a good guy, mostly.
There's this guy.
And Steranko, you spent a lot of time on Steranko in the article.
We drove down to, I think, Reading, Pennsylvania.
That was a fascinating section, because I'd forgotten all that about him.
Yeah, he was quite a character.
You think his story? You think his stories are true about it?
Yeah, I lived in Berkeley for years, and people really did have the impression that Marvel comics were written by a bunch of stone freaks. They thought that had to be true, that drugs had to be involved or something like that. But everyone was really kind of square and kind of wanted to be hip or something. There was learning there that was just nerdy.
Nerdy is the word.
Yeah.
A bunch
Hence
of
the Nehru jacket that Jeannie mentioned earlier, which I
Maria.
quit wearing when a truck driver whistled at me on Second Avenue.
Well, you know, though, the irony is that you nerds had the last laugh.
Yeah,
You know,
nerds rule.
it was the triumph of some kind of sincerity.
And then here's Marie, who was the
Marie, wow.
that was the main, if not only, female artist, could do both superheroes and funny stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, the photo from the upper right is near the end of her life, but I think it captures what many of us remember of Marie.
Flo and I went out to see her in when she was in assisted living. That, you know, probably 6 years before she died, and she was she was drifting a bit, but she was still funny as all get out and recognized us both just fine. So that was a treat.
Yeah, I'd get messages to her from Scott Edelman and his wife Irene Verporton, who was very much in touch with her and so forth. And we'd send a couple of messages, you know, back and forth to each other in that last couple of years of her life. I kept thinking, you know, somehow or other she was going to, you know, live forever if any of us did, you know.
Yeah.
Robin, I think I just reading the article, of course, again, you got people to open up in a way that I don't think they ordinarily would have for a fan magazine, or even if, you know, the Times or somebody. You really had a gift for sort of understanding what made people at Marvel tick, I think. You know, it really, you know, they, including Stan, said stuff that I don't think they would have, you know, ordinarily.
Do you think it was helped a little bit by the fact that she had worked there before, so they could sort of slip back into an easier thing, you know, and so as opposed to somebody who had just come in that they'd never met before?
Well, journalism was different then. People really weren't as guarded. They became more guarded as they got smarter. Just in general, that I noticed this change in Hollywood, particularly, that people got more protective. But as an interviewer, I mean, I know I'm not shutting up now, but I was very quiet, so people would jump in to fill that gap, almost. And I did like hearing people. I liked if I would want to know all about you, you know, and people responded to that, and I think, you know, that I really did want to hear what they had to say. I have to say about Stan, I mean, you all can speak to this so much more, but he really understood good and evil in a way that it's taken me years to have an appreciation for. The villain, you know, the self-love of a villain, that he was complicated in that way and really on the right side of the law as far as I'm concerned, then and now.
By the way, this was going on around the time that the article came out. This was a big deal because it was an anti-drug story, but even though it was anti-drug, it violated the comics code. So Stan and Goodman courageously published it without the comics code, which you know was the kiss of death. Anybody?
I think Stan was surprised that Goodman would do that, because Goodman generally didn't want to do anything that would upset his fellow members. You know, I remember that's why I think that's part of the reason why he canceled magazines like the Black and White Spider-Man and the Savage Tales. You know, he didn't want to do things that that John Goldwater and Archie and that, you know, DC and so forth were going to criticize him for and so forth. But in this particular case, somehow Stan evidently very easily persuaded him to drop the code for a few issues because of the fact that it was actually somebody in the government who had asked him to do an anti-drug issue.
Well, Goodman had sold the company already, so
yeah, why did he care?
He was hanging around to Anybody else have any memories of that particular brouhaha?
No.
Okay, then now we get into the purely commercial of it. So, Robin, this is so you went right from Marvel to Rolling Stone, and then 2 days later you went to The Sopranos, right?
No, not right. Years went by. I do have to make one remark, though, that Blue Bloods is now going into its 12th season.
Wells, I'm sorry.
No, because at the time that was written, it was the 9th season.
I should have done that update.
God bless it, you know. Yeah. We're not involved with it, but we do get the royalties. It's a wonderful thing.
Was the comic?
I had a whole lifetime between Rolling Stone and Sopranos, and a whole, you know, Northern Exposure was a wonderful show. I think that was the No, that wasn't the first TV show I did. The first TV show was Year in the Life with Richard Kiley and Sarah Jessica Parker, who was then 16 years old, and a whole bunch of other actors. And that was just a great experience. I'd gone to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and so somebody I met there was now doing television. I'm still friendly with those people. One of them died, but one of them I still know. But that got me my start, Year in the Life, and then I went on to other shows, and Northern Exposure was one of them. That was a great show, sweet show.
Love that show.
Sopranos, I had worked for David Chase before, a show. Oh, there he is. There I am. And there's Mitch, that's my husband. There's David, Dower David in the middle. And I forget what Emmy that was for. Probably, Whitecaps, probably writing. But what a ride that was, we had read the pilot. We're working with David on a project, and we read the pilot before it was made. And even the network version, which was very clean, without the swearing and the nudity, it was brilliant. And it was funny. It was just a funny show. And so we quit a really good job to go to New York to do the show with him. And because we didn't know what was going to happen. And we just made those first 12 episodes. He'd already done the pilot. So we wrote 12 of them and filmed them in a complete vacuum in New York. In other words, usually in television, you're airing while you're making them. But we did The Sopranos just in a vacuum and just for fun. It was just, we worked really hard, as you know, in your, in all of the work that you do. If Roy wouldn't stay until 7 or 8 at night, and we would work into the night on writing and on filming, but we didn't know if it was going to go or not. We didn't know whether it would succeed. It was just for fun. It was just purely for the joy of it. It was a great experience, and it was for many years.
Was anything you learned in comics or from Stan of use, either had something to do or not to do in your future career?
Not in the work, no, but I think, and I think I just shared, an attitude about life and good, and wanting to do a good job, just things like that. I don't think there's anything specific. Not that I know, not that registers, in a conscious way.
Critics will have to write about that.
What's that?
The critics will have to write about that. Roy and I will have to write a book about that.
About which?
About the influence of your comics years on your TV years.
Yeah, that's right.
Roy and I will write a book about it for tomorrow's.
Well, I'll read that book.
Huh?
I'll read that book.
This was just 40 years later. The Hulk made Rolling Stone cover again.
Wow.
To which Stan's response was, "What took you so long?"
That sounds like him.
Yeah.
And this is that humongous book Roy talked about, he and Stan. I guess Stan has the outer cover and you have the...
He's got the real light box, it weighs about a pound. I got the 15-pound book there. Yeah.
Now, is that a wig?
Pardon?
Is that a wig? That's implants.
That's implants. So he evolved.
He got implants in about 1980.
Okay.
So yeah, those are implants.
Yeah, was this I can't remember if this was filmed shot back at the at Tashin's store there in LA, or maybe it was later when we were at the Hammer Museum on a panel with Kevin Smith or something. But anyway, they took those pictures, for publicity and so forth. I was kind of thrilled to get to do it, and everything.
Yeah, this is a great photo.
It is, and then this is your book about Stan.
Yes, that's what I saw today.
Right. So that's about the same size, and but it's sort of focused. Well, you describe it, Roy.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a biography. I thought it was a career biography. Stan didn't want to really talk about his past life, didn't want to be interviewed, and I didn't feel like doing a biography, and they didn't particularly want one. So I just wrote about his career with a little bit of bio, put in there. There's a couple little, minor errors and so forth, but mostly I was pretty happy to get it. The funny thing I remember is when I saw him there about 30 something hours before he passed away at his home in the Hollywood Hills. one of the people from POW Entertainment brought a just printed, like almost first copy of that book to him, and they put a pillow on his knees, because it was so heavy, 15 or 16 pounds or whatever it was. And so he'd seen an earlier version, but he was looking at it and so forth. And that was when the guy from POW told him, says, well, the first edition of this is 1,000 copies. It's going to sell for like 1,500 copies. And Stan just looked at him, who the hell's going to buy it? Of course, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of days later. The book came out about a week later and sold out within about a week or two, probably, because of the publicity. And then they went into the so-called mass market. And they're getting ready a new version of it with a couple of minor corrections for next year, because next year, 2022 will be the 100th anniversary of Stan's, birth. So they're going to bring out another version of it. Or Stan told me that day in 2018, he said, this living to be 100 years old isn't as easy and as much fun as I thought it would be.
And this is another huge, this is the same size as that other book. It's a huge book. And then on the right is something you're doing for, what company is that?
The Folio Society in the UK. I select, sometimes with the advice of other people, especially when it gets past the 70s or 80s, when I really stopped reading comics. It's like Captain America stories, from the first until last week. This is a nice big book. I did others got others coming out, Spider-Man, Thor, Hulk, and I did 3 other books on the bronze, silver, golden, purple, plastic, whatever age, and so forth.
And here is Ego, which has grown from that issue up there with the picture of Gil Kane on the cover is one of my favorite drawings of anybody. It was a caricature Marie Severin did. Gil drew this stuff around it, but
great.
Marie Severin did this caricature, a wonderful caricature of Gil, and I showed it to him, before it came out, and said, "What do you think, Gil?" And he said, "She leaves me no illusions."
She drew his nose job scar there, didn't she?
Yeah. But he liked that picture. He ended up, I think, she gave it to her. He bought her something. He had it hanging in his home in California for many years. And the other picture down there is the first out of 170 issues, the first ever issue that centered around Jack Kirby of my magazine, Alter Ego, mainly because the flagship publication of the company is the Jack Kirby Collector, so I didn't feel I needed to, but I felt, well, I should do one issue about Jack, and I had this wonderful drawing that, had never been published anywhere, and so forth, that was online, so we made that the cover, and that's coming out in a couple of weeks. It follows the Gary Friedrich issues, and so forth. Those were especially fun issues to do.
Thanks, Roy. And this is my Biography of Stan, came out in 2019. Paperback came out last year. I did get it. I think since my mutant power is nagging, I was able to get Stan to do a couple of, I can't say last interviews because, we love to do interviews in general, but after telling me, no, I'm not doing any interviews, he did 2. And I interviewed Roy and 1,000 other people for the book. And if you're enjoying what's coming out of my mouth, I did the audio book too. Imagine 14 hours of this. Now how could you not want to do that? Anyway, it's been well reviewed, and everybody should buy it and have a few copies. And
I got mine.
Thank you. And here is Robin's book. Want to talk a little bit about it?
There it is, my life.
Okay, it's got sex, drugs, and rock and roll all together.
Yeah, it's like don't let your daughter read this. Yeah, it all worked out though. Here I still am,
Yeah, and here we all are. We're the better for it. And now we come full circle.
I actually do write about what I've talked about a little bit. I do write about going to do that article and going back there and what it was and how it was. So the Marvel article plays, is a chapter or 2 in that book, I think. So
we are drawing to the close. Anybody have anything they wanted to say, ask? We don't have audience Q&A because there's no, it's pre-recorded. But if there's anything anybody wanted to make sure they got in for posterity, now's the time.
a pleasure to work with all these people and everything. And, I found the people in the comic book business I liked them a lot better than the teachers I had worked with for the previous several.
It's true. It spoils you for everything else almost. Really.
It really does. That's kind of why I remember this part of my life so much more vividly than, the next 10 years that followed. And then the rest of that was kind of hazy until my life, it's just how you remember as you age. I mean, the last 5 years are much more prominent, and then the rest is kind of hazy. But if the beginning is really solid or really special in some way, that's what you take with you. And that's why people who are in the industry now who are writing about comics get in touch with me. And it's like such a pleasure to get a call or an email from someone. So yeah, it really stays with you forever. I mean, I'm surrounded on my walls with art and stuff. And I don't have anything, from the next 10 years, the next 10 years after that. It's really, it's in your blood, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
That's really
Robin, sitting next to you at a little card table off to the side, I have to say I watched and really tried to carry through with your no guff attitude. And when you left and I was moved over to your desk and your job, well, I tried it. And of course, went into the bullpen at all 5-1, squeaking about something instead of speaking authoritatively. And John Verporton picked me up and put me on top of a filing cabinet, which is how much authority I was able to speak with. And let me try to get down there by myself in a mini skirt. So.
How old were you, Robin, when you in '68 when you worked there? You weren't much older than Jeannie was at the age of 20, really, were you?
I was born in 45, so what does that make me? Somebody do
23,
math.
22,
Yeah,
23.
probably 22 or 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, just starting off, it was my first real job because before that I've just been a waitress. Oh, I worked at Houghton Mifflin very briefly in Boston. I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
No pictures.
Well, Marvel wasn't the straight world. It wasn't hip exactly, but it wasn't the straight world.
Right. Alternative.
And by straight, I mean conventional.
Yeah.
It was an artistic place, really. And I think of it so fondly. Like someone was saying, I love that. I think of it so fondly. It's vivid to me, and I don't remember details a lot.
Well, it's great seeing everybody, and thanks for doing this, Danny, and thanks to the San Diego. Oh, here's my plug. See this movie?
What is it?
What?
It's called The Outside Story. It just came out with Brian Henry, Tyree Henry. Anyway, my kid Alexander Spurlock Trimpe, whose godmother was Flo, wrote the music for this feature film.
Congratulations. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you, Robin
Travis.
Green, Roy Thomas, Mimi Gold, Gene
Thanks,
Thomas,
Danny.
Linda Fite. Thank you, Travis Langley behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Everybody stay well, and we'll see
Keep
you.
in touch, y'all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
All right, thank you.